Mockito. So we will talk about what is and why Mockito, and we're going to use how we can use mocking using Mockito, and we'll talk about the basic set of Mockito annotations. What is and why Mockito? So Mockito is a mocking framework. It's one of the most popular mocking framework out there. It lets you write tests with a clean and simple APIs. And in fact, Mockito tests are very readable and they produce clean verification errors. So we're going to talk about what the verification is all about. Basically, you are going to use Mockito to get smart fake implementations of classes or interfaces out of your reach. Meaning, if your target class that you want to test is using some kind of dependency object, that dependency object needs to be mocked, okay, so that you can do unit testing. And you're using Mockito to create a fake object of those dependencies, okay. So we decided to run main conferences, and we should use JUnit 4 and Mockito because we think they are the future of TDD and mocking in Java. So Dan North, originator of BDD, says that Mockito is in fact one of the best. Okay, so let's see how we can use mocking. So what is a mocking? So basically, typically, the way that you test is in these three things: arrange, act, and assert. Okay, you arrange things, then you basically act, and then you just verify by using assert. Okay? So this is a typical test structure we have. Okay? So this is the typical test structure without dependency. Basically, you create a target object. We are going to call it testee. So we create a testee object, and we're going to do something with the testee object by calling a method of that testee target object. And we got the result, and we basically check whether the result is what we expect, right? Assert true or assert that, okay? Now, when you're using, when your target testee class has a dependency, then you need to mock it so that you are just testing it logic of your test target, not the dependency, right? So here, you have to create a mock object first, right? Typically, you're going to use this mock annotation instead of using mock method. So this is a static method of the Mockito class. So you can actually create a mock object by using mock method, or you can use the annotation. We're going to actually see annotation usage moving forward. So you create the mock object first. So we're going to call it dependency type. Okay. Then you have to train that mock object to behave. And the way you're going to train that mock object to behave in a certain way is using this when static method of Mockito class. Okay, so when mock object some method, so mock object has some method is called, then it should return some object. So this is how you're going to train your mock object. Okay, so when this mock object is used inside your testee target class, this is the result. This sum object is going to be the result. And then you're going to call, you're going to actually do some action. So you're going to in fact test your test target. So you're going to do something method of the target object, and it got the result. So we're going to actually again do assert on that, the result. We also verify whether the mock object some method is in fact called or not. So in this case, this is the verification. So you do want to make sure, in fact, your some method of your mock object, in fact, is called. So that is a verification. So these are, when you have a dependency in your test target, you have to create a mock object and then train the mock, and then you verify the mock. Okay? All right. So that is how mocking is done. Okay. So let's see how we can use Mockito. So these are the APIs. In fact, Mockito has a pretty simple set of annotations. Okay? So for creating mock object, you can use either @mock annotation, or you use mock static method of the Mockito class. Okay? And the spy is also in an annotation. When you want to actually use a real object rather than mock object, then you use spy. Okay? So I'm going to demonstrate the usage of spy later on. So typical usage of spy instead of the mock is, when you want to actually have a partial mocking. So particular mock object has a multiple method, and you want to actually have some method to be from real object, while others from your faked method, and that's the time that you can use a spy. Okay, so in our simple case, we're going to use a mock because we're actually mocking all methods of the dependencies. Okay. Inject mocks annotation is used to inject your mock object to target object. Okay, then for initializing your mock object, you have two different choices. One is using run with a Mockito JUnit runner class, or you can actually use init mocks method of Mockito notation. I found that actually, the run with Mockito JUnit runner is not always working, so I usually use the second choice. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate, why some of that cases doesn't work with the run with, but Mockito notation with init mock always work. Okay, and then you can train the mocks using when and then return, when then throw. So this is the case when it returns some valid return value. When this method is called, you also want to, the mock object to throw some kind of exception, then you can use then throw. Okay. Actually, there are a bunch of other mocking training methods that are available, but we're gonna actually try just these two. In general, with these two, you should be able to have pretty much all test cases covered. Okay, so this is an example. So here we have a person test. So person has address as a dependency, and so when this method is called, should return complete personal information including address. Okay, we want to actually have the address method of retrieve address information to return USA Cambridge, and then we actually assert to see whether the person's retrieve personal information is returning information from that address, and then you also verify this. So this is the way that you can verify whether that address retrieve address info method is in fact called just once. Okay, all right. So your person test should be either annotated the run with Mockito JUnit runner, or you can actually use this guy, Mockito annotation init.mocks. As I said, I found that this Mockito annotation init.mocks case is always working, while run with JUnit runner class doesn't work in some cases. Okay. All right. So for initialization of the mocks, you have to do either this guy or this guy. And then you are going to mock the address object. So this is how you are going to create a mock object. So in our previous example, we are using mock method, right? In our before setup method for creating a mock object. The easier and the better way of doing it is using mock annotation. So here I'm creating address as a mock object. Okay, and then we use inject mocks annotation to inject this address object to the person object. Okay, and again here before, I'm actually basically creating person object, and then I'm calling init mocks method of the Mockito notation to initialize all this mock object. Okay, and then we are going to train the mock object here, then we perform the testing with the assertion, and then we verify. So this is what you do with Mockito. Okay, so that is pretty much what we have in the presentation. So let's actually do the lab. So again, I want you to unzip Mockito hands-on lab. So I'm going to jar xbf. Okay, and I am going to import. So apps and yes, Mockito. Okay, so I'm gonna let you do this simple start case, Mockito simple test example. So here, if you take a look at the code, so let me just close all these guys. Okay. I have a person class. So person class has address as dependencies. Okay, and this person class has retrieve personal information, and it's actually calling the method of address retrieve address information. Okay, so if you take a look at the address, it's basically supposed to actually provide some information. Okay, and I have a main method, just for testing it. So I have a person class object created. We set the address with the as a dependency to person, and we just display this guy. Okay, so if I run this guy, then it should actually display Sang Shin is USA Boston. Okay, now let's actually see the address. It doesn't actually is implemented. This address class is a dependency class that is being provided by third-party vendor. So, let's say it returned some kind of junk value. Okay, yet we want to test it. Okay, yet we want to test it. So this is how you can use a mocking. All right. So in our test code, if you take a look at the person test code, okay, first we are going to create the mocking of address, and then we are using inject mocks to inject address or mocking into person class. Okay, and then as a way of actually initializing mock object, we're going to use a Mockito annotation.init mocks, and then we train the address. When the address retrieve address info method is being invoked, we want to return this value, Seoul, Korea. Okay, Korea, Seoul. And then we call person, retrieve person information is Sang Shin, Seoul, Korea. This is how we are testing it by faking the address object with this training. And then you also check whether that this retrieve address info method is in fact called just once. Okay, so if I run this guy, it succeeded. Okay, so I'm gonna just change this guy. It says South Korea, but it says XXXX, and if I save the change, then it should fail. Okay, all right. So this is how you do it. And if you take a look at the README the text file, your exercise is this: add another dependency class called social networking to the person class, and this social networking class has string of Facebook account and Twitter account fields, and so retrieve person information of the person class should display the social networking information of the person as well. And we want to actually test the person class mocking social networking dependency. Okay, so let me actually demonstrate this one. Then I want you in fact do another lab. So let me actually demonstrate this one, and I'll explain the string Mockito computer exercise. Okay, so let's actually make sure that so this is test case failure. So let me just save the change to make sure we are in fact the clean state. Okay. Okay, so again, I usually want to make sure that I have a test code on the left and the person on the right, target on the right, and I maximize the screen. So this is how I want to start. So I'm gonna actually write the test code here. So here, so this is probably the case that we need to modify. So return complete information of the address. So what we need to do is we are going to train. So when the social networking object retrieve count method, we want to train it, then return it should return Facebook. I'm going to just call it Facebook 1, and the Twitter. So in my case, Twitter is JPassion. Okay. So this is what I expect. Okay. So I train it, and then we're going to perform a search. So it should actually return, in addition to the country and the city, it should also return these values. Okay. All right. We also actually want to make sure that retrieve account information is also called once. Okay, so I'm going to just copy this code. And so this time it's not address, but social networking. We haven't created a social networking class yet, so that's the reason we're actually having a compiler. And this is retrieve account. Okay. All right, so let's actually create the social networking class. So we can actually create mock annotation, private social networking, and social networking, like this. Okay. So we're gonna create the social networking. Okay. Class. Social networking. We need to create the under src main and finish. Okay, so we need to have two private fields. Private string Facebook and private string and Twitter. Okay. All right, and we need to have a method, right? So public and should return string retrieve account. Was it accounts or accounts? We'll see. And then it should return some value, right? So here it should actually return Facebook and Twitter, something like this. Okay, but again, you know, what we want to test is not the social networking class. What we want to test is the person class. Okay, so again, we could assume that, you know, we have a social networking class is from third-party vendor, and we don't even have, you know, that third-party vendor library yet. So we can again, you know, think this is returning some kind of junk, right? But yet we still want to test it, right? All right, so this is social networking persons. Again, this is a target class. I usually won't have a target class right here. And this is a person test, right? So, all right, so we have mocking, inject. So we have a mocked it, okay? And let's see what the, so it's a retrieve accounts, okay? So it should be retrieve account, okay? All right. Oh, so E is missing. Yeah, it's misspelling. Okay, so let's see whether this one works. Okay, and save the change, and it failed. So let's see why it failed. So I am going to run the test, and it says expected Sang Shin Korea Seoul, Facebook 1, and JPassion, but was this. So somehow it's not returning things right. So we somehow this training failed. So when address object is returning, then return. Oh, you know, we didn't actually change this personal information, you know, in the person class, right? So if you take a look at the person class, so let's actually go to person class, control, and then you can click this guy to go to the source, okay? Or you can press the F3. Okay, so here we didn't actually call the social networking. So we didn't even actually have this guy, you know, injected as a dependency. Social networking, social networking. Okay, and we need to call this guy, and it's retrieve account. Oh, we need a plus. Okay, so let's save the change. Now it's successful. Okay, all right. So that is actually one exercise I want to do, and then let's actually take a look at the another exercise. Okay, which is the Mockito computer. So if you take a look at the readme.txt file of the Mockito computer start project, okay, so here we are going to have the computer class has two methods, compute square after addition and compute square after subtraction, which depend on adder and subtractor dependency classes. And we'll assume that again, the adder and subtractor classes are not completely written yet, okay? And then yet we want to do unit testing of the computer class by mocking adder and subtractor dependencies, okay? By the way, adder and subtractor class is already provided, okay? Exercise 2 is when a negative number is given, runtime exception needs to be thrown by adder and subtractor with a message of this. So this is where you need to train your mock object, in this case adder and subtractor, to return, to throw a runtime exception when negative number is given. Okay? All right, so let me actually demonstrate this case. Okay, so let's actually take a look at the code. Others. Okay, so if you take a look at the computer class, okay, computer class has a dependency on adder and subtractor, and the computer class has two methods: compute square after addition. So basically, what we want to do is we want to add these two values, and then we are going to square those, that value, the added value. And this one is, we're going to again create the square value after subtraction. So we're going to actually call subtract method of the subtractor. So basically this is representing subtracted value. And then we are going to just multiply to provide a square value. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to actually test this computer class, okay, without depending on the behavior of these dependencies. So we need to provide mocking for this adder and subtractor, okay? So if you take a look at test code, we don't have any test code yet. So we're gonna actually create the test code, okay? So let me actually demonstrate this one as well, and I'll let you actually do the lab exercises, the simple one as well as simple Mockito things and also this computer thing. So I'll give you about 30 minutes after that. So let me actually demonstrate this one first. So we need to create test code, okay? So we're gonna actually create under here, new, and the class we are going to call computer test. Oops. Computer test. Okay. And we are going to actually, we're gonna actually see what we are going to test. Okay. So we are going to create English like description of what we are going to test. Okay, so again, whenever, so let me just go to like this computer, and then I want to expand it. Okay, so again, if you take a look at the readme.txt file, it gives you a sense of what you are going to test. So basically, you are going to see whether these two methods are behaving as expected. Compute square after addition and compute square after subtraction. So we are going to actually try this guy first. So, compute square after addition. So we're going to again describe. Sometimes sometimes it's rather difficult to actually come up with a method name. In that case, just use English description first. And then from that English description, you can actually come up with a method name. So here, what we're going to try to do is given, well, we can say this test message should return square value of the given number, two numbers given square value of the addition. Square value of the addition added value of the two numbers. So this is, could be better English description, but this is best as I can come up at this point. So from this description, you can actually create a test code. So I'm going to actually create the test template. Okay, so should return square value of the added value of the two numbers. So in this case, I'm just using exactly the same description of English. Okay, so once you're happy with the method name, and you can just delete that guy. Okay. All right, so now what we want to do is we are going to create, in this case, computer object first. That is our target. So that's the first thing you need to do. You need to create target testee object. So we're going to say computer, and new computer. Okay, so we created, so let's actually import. Why is actually the annotation is disallowed for the location. I think this is one of the I think the Vikram was having this problem. I don't know why this is the case. All right, so let's actually try to solve this one first. This is the test case. Junit test. This is strange. Yeah, in the case of the Vikram, I mean, he has to actually restart the Eclipse and it worked okay. So let's see why this is not happy with that. So let's multiple. Yeah, so it seems like there is actually some syntax error here as well. Throws exception. Oh, okay. So I have incorrect the character. Okay, so now it's all set. Computer. Okay, so it should return square value. So what we need to do is we're gonna actually say computer, and then we're gonna call the compute square after addition. Okay, and x and y. So here we're gonna actually create an x and y. Here, int x is 2, int y 3, something like that, and then it should return. So if it worked fine, basically we are going to add 5, and it should return 25, right? So we're gonna actually use assert that, and this value is we're gonna use equal to and 25. And we have to import this guy. Okay, and we have to import. Okay, so obviously this will fail, right? So let's save the change, and it will fail. Okay, because maybe this one is computer. Yeah, so let's actually again this one returns if you take a look, so the reason it failed, let's actually see the test message result. So JUnit, so I'm going to actually run the testing. Oops. So select this guy. So, the null pointer exception, right? In computer Java 17. So we are actually having, we're trying to call this guy, and it fails. So, obviously the dependency object was not handled correctly. Okay, so if you take a look at the adder, add and so here we are returning 0. Again, we are assuming this logic is not available. Okay, and and subtractor same thing. But we want to train this mock object, these dependencies behavior using mock object. Okay, all right. So something is not right, obviously. So obviously we didn't really do the mocking. Okay, but let's see, when we actually call this guy, it should return, in this case, Oh, so let's actually take a look at the computer. We have, yeah, so we did not create, the reason it failed is because we didn't create this computer object using this constructor. So if you actually use this constructor to create the address, then it should at least return 0, right? Okay. But what we want to do is we don't want to even actually use this guy to set this dependency object. Instead, we're going to actually use mocking. Okay. All right. So we're going to actually do mocking here. So here we're going to actually do mock, and we're going to have adder, and we're going to call it adder. And you also have mock subtractor. Okay, and let's import the class. So you are importing org, Mockito, and mock. Okay. All right. So and then we need to inject this dependency object into the computer. Okay. In production environment, you might actually create the computer object having this dependency object as an argument, right? But in this case, we are going to test using Mockito. So we're going to actually use, the Mockito-based injection. So it's going to be inject mocks, and you specify your target that you want to inject this mock object. So in this case, it's going to be computer, right? Computer. Okay, and then we need to actually initialize we want to call the Mockito notation init method. Okay, you can use either, like we're gonna actually both. I mean, it shouldn't actually hurt. Run with, and then you can specify Mockito JUnit runner. So you should be able to do either this guy. Mockito JUnit runner. Mockito JUnit runner cannot be result to a variable. I don't know why. It should be. Oh, I have to actually use a class. Sorry, yeah. JUnit runner class object. Okay, yeah. So either this guy, or you are going to use before and setup, and here you're going to use Mockito annotation, and then init mocks, and this one should be this. Okay. All right, so either you do this guy or this guy. Again, I found that this one is working, always, but this one sometimes doesn't work. Okay, so we're gonna try that later on. So for now, let's have both. Okay, and or you can just comment this guy out. All right. Here, since we have a before method, we might as well have this object, the computer object, and also the test code. To be moved in before. So we're going to use the x and y. Okay. So here the int x. Oh, so basically we have the field private int x and private int y. Okay, and then like this, so that this x and y can be accessible in other method, right? Okay, so we have same thing with the computer. So we, since we have a computer, injected with the annotated with the inject mocks. So we have these x and y, and computer fields are initialized before each test, and then we perform mocking initialization. Okay. All right. So now we have the set up things right. Okay. But it will still fail because we haven't trained our mock object, right? Okay, so if I try to copy the data, it will still fail. Okay, and if let's take a look at the failure message. the failure message is, I expect 25, but return 0. Because if you take a look at, again, add and subtractor class, it returns 0, right? Okay, so we need to train it. We need to train it, right? So the train is basically when, right? So when, and then when your adder method of add method is called with an add x and y. Okay, let's actually make sure that this is yeah, sometimes I have to actually use Mockito like this directly. Okay, Mockito, and then I have to import this guy. Okay, so now then when add method of the adder dependency is called, then we should be able to train it using then return value, integer value. So that should return, it should actually return 5, right? Okay, like this. So we train it. Okay, so let's actually see whether that works. Now it works, because now when the add method of adder dependency object is called, it now returns 5, and then when compute square after addition, a method actually making a multiply each other, then it returns 25. Okay, so that works fine. And one last thing is you want to actually verify. In fact, the add method is in fact called. Okay, so verify. You can see this is kind of optional in a say. Again, I have to use the Mockito verify. Right, and the mock object is the adder, and here now we're gonna actually call add method with x and y. Okay, and it should verify. Okay, all right. Oh, you know what? It actually failed. If if you see, that's actually why it failed. Okay, so it says it's supposed to be called it's supposed to be called twice. It's supposed to be called just once as a default, but it is called twice. Okay, but was 2 times. All right. So the reason is because if you take a look at our adder class, I'm sorry, the computer class is actually calling add method twice, right? It actually called the add method twice. Okay, so here you can actually specify the actual number of times. So here, Mockito times 2. Okay, and then it should succeed. Okay, all right. Okay, so the same thing with the subtractor. Okay, so I want to actually do this exercise is including subtractor. Okay, so I will give you guys about the 25 to 30 minutes to do the whole Mockito exercise. Oh, by the way, I was actually telling you so let's try a few things. So if I try to use the run with, okay, so let's try to use run with, and let's import the class, and instead of this guy, all right, then if I save the change, it failed somehow. So that's the reason I said that use Mockito notation in mocks rather than this guy. The documentation says that either you should be able to use this guy or this guy, but I found usage of mocks is always working, while run with is not always working. Okay, let's just change it back, and here I can just comment this guy out and save the change, and the things still should work. Now, in terms of the spy, so you should be able to actually use a spy. Spy is, in this case, is actually using, so let me actually import the class. And here, I could use the spy. In this case, it's in fact a real object rather than the mock object. So in this case, let's actually, run this code, and it will in fact it actually runs, it's successful. Okay, because at this point it doesn't really matter this is a mock object or a real object. Okay, so that's the reason it worked. Okay, so save the change, and things are still working fine. So I'm going to give you guys about 30 minutes to finish up the old Mockito exercise. In fact, I have another exercise. Oh, this is a computer, so yeah, so that is the one that I was thinking about. Okay, so I'll give you 30 minutes.